So in this video we're going to go over what a game mode blueprint is, and this is a nice precursor to when we do UI for the project, because we will have to create a new game mode just so that we have a different pawn in our game, our main menu level. So a game mode, and we already have one built into the project. It's in Blueprints, Character, First Person Game Mode. But a game mode is basically a blueprint that gets spawned in your level automatically, and it determines what kind of character class and what type of controller class are going to be spawned in the level. So for instance, to determine what game mode you're going to use in the level, I suppose we could start on that, is if you go to settings and you go to world settings, it will pop up here beside your details. One of the first things that you'll see is the game mode that you're using. So there is a main game mode. Let me see where that is. That's in Blockout, okay. But the one that we're going to be using is the one in Blueprints and Character. So you can choose what game mode you're actually going to spawn into the level through this world settings. So I've got first person game mode, and you can see here when I switch over to that, it's saying that my default pawn class is going to be my first person character. HUD class is going to be none. There is a first person HUD, but to be honest, that's not the way I really use this. There's a lot of things in here that are typically used for like multiplayer games and things like that. What player controller class we're going to be using, what game state class we're going to be using, we haven't kind of gone over these here yet, or player state. And then what spectator class. Again, this is typically for multiplayer games. When you die, you can become a spectator, or you can just join a game as a spectator. And a game mode will kind of determine as well like how players log into online games. But for our single player experience, we can just typically use a game mode to develop what pawn we're going to be spawning into our level. So for instance, if I made a new game mode here, so if I went to Blueprint class, you can see it's one of the default ones. We've got a game mode base, and I just call this test game mode, and open this up. You can see that this is very much like any other blueprint that you would find. The only thing is, in the default class settings, we've got this section called classes, and in here is where we can kind of determine what we're going to use in terms of like a player character or a player controller class, or even a HUD class if we wish. When it comes to HUD, I'll show you how to set that up in the player or the player controller, so don't think you have to use that. So for instance, I can go to the default pawn class now, and I could go, hey, I want to use this character, I don't know what this character is, as my default pawn, and my actual controller class we'll just leave as a default, okay? So when I come to my level and I go into the world settings, which kind of like level settings, I can change this here one to test game mode, and you can see now that it is going to spawn in instead of our first person character, our character class. So if I press play, we've got a character class in here. The only thing is it doesn't have any like logic attached. It doesn't have any components, so we can't see anything. Another thing that I can do is I can override whatever game mode I'm going to be using in the level. So even if I have this game mode, I can come into the settings and I can say, hey look, I want to use the first person character in here. Press play, and now we've got our first person character spawning by default. So if you ever kind of wondered why, I'm trying to find where the character has a player start here. I think it's this end. I shouldn't make these levels too symmetrical. Just make this unlit so we can see. So if you've ever kind of wondered why it's the first person character that spawns in here and not another character that you've developed yourself, it is because the game mode is determining what that character is by default. So another thing that, you know, a game mode is good at, and this is going to come up when we come to saving, is because it's like the only thing that is spawned, or the only game mode, there's only one game mode spawned in the level. It's sometimes good to have like your player scores kind of contained in there within variables. And the reason is we do that there is sometimes, you know, you've got to destroy whatever character you've spawned and then respawn in a new one. And by doing that, it kind of resets all the variables in there, where you can kind of hold on to them within your game mode if you wanted to. So it's kind of like a game management script within Unity. Just we have a class that kind of handles that for us. So that's what a game mode is. We're going to be using this in the UI task. So it's a good idea just to have a good understanding of what a game mode is and how they work. But just to recap, game mode is a blueprint that doesn't really contain anything physical, like, you know, a mesh or anything like that. It's spawned in by default by the level. You have to have a game mode. You can choose what game mode that you're going to have in the world settings, and you can create your own game mode with your own kind of class rules, determining what type of player and what type of controller class that we're going to use. And this is going to be really important, because when we set up a main menu, we're going to be doing this inside a different level, which is going to be blank. And we don't want to have a first person character in there. We don't want to have a first person character with a gun in our main menu. We just want to have the actual mouse cursor and things like that. And that's why we're going to use a different game mode.